So given these deficits in or biases in information processing that are associated with social cognition, or this sort of understanding of our social world, this has left us with these two major sets of difficulties. On the one hand, difficulties in what we might label elementary cognition, attention, memory, working memory, sensory ability. And then on the other hand, these deficits in social cognition, which are biases in sort of understanding emotions, processing of emotion, social perception, the ability to attribute things to other people, and biases in the way in which we make attributions about events that have occurred in our environment. These two sets of difficulties have been of great interest to researchers because both sets of difficulties appear to map pretty closely onto functional difficulties that people with schizophrenia often have. We've talked in previous lectures about the degree to which the diagnosis of schizophrenia appears to be associated with some very significant functional disability. Many people with schizophrenia have difficulty working, forming friendships, being able to use sort of their free time productively, engage in hobbies, etc., at least before the onset of treatment. And what we have found is that these difficulties in cognitive skill and social cognitive skill have a very close relationship to measures of functional outcome. Now, when we say functional outcome, we can measure it in different ways. So one way to measure it is when a clinician might interact with a client, talk to a client about what they're doing, find out the number of friends they have, how often they engage in social activity, are they involved in their community, do they do community activities, do they work, how often do they work, what's the quality of their work on the job. These types of sort of clinician-rated measures of functioning that are often enhanced with reports from family members or coworkers. These types of measures are known as community functioning measures. And it's been very clear that cognitive difficulties map quite closely to performance on these types of clinician-rated skills. A second measure of progress or outcome in people with schizophrenia is the ability to benefit from psychosocial rehabilitation programs. We will talk later in the course about social skills training. We will also talk about cognitive remediation training. We'll talk about supported employment interventions. And in just about all of these cases, the level of cognitive disability that people have play a large role in the ability of people with schizophrenia to benefit from these psychosocial interventions. People with greater cognitive difficulty have a harder time benefiting from social skills training, for example. They may have a more difficult time benefiting from supported employment. So they play an important role in the ability of people to benefit from these psychosocial treatments. In addition, if we measure outcome in terms of the ability to, for example, reschedule a doctor's appointment or plan out a trip to the beach or the zoo, when you look at those types of sort of what are called performance-based measures of everyday function, you find the cognitive difficulties here too are very closely related to performance on these tasks. Taken together, these findings suggest a close relationship between cognition and functioning. And they might suggest that if we were to improve cognitive functioning, we might be able to improve everyday social disability in people with schizophrenia. So that's been some of the promise of identifying these cognitive difficulties. The social cognitive deficits that I've talked about in terms of attributional style, facial affect recognition, theory of mind, social perception, these two, while there's a smaller body of literature, these functions as well have been linked to the ability to live independently, to the likelihood of acting out in negative ways on psychiatric units, and they've been related to general community functioning as well. So both sets of these deficits we've been describing appear to have a close relationship to functional outcome, and this is why they've become a major target of future treatment. At the same time, though, we're focusing, of course, in this lecture on the psychology of the disorder. What do we understand about the minds of folks with people with schizophrenia, and how might their functioning, how might their mental functioning be influencing some of their symptoms and their behavior? A recent, very exciting area of research in understanding what might cause some of the difficulties in people with schizophrenia has been the study of dysfunctional beliefs. This has been work that's been conducted by Paul Grant and Aaron Beck. And in their work, what they've tried to investigate is to try and understand how negative beliefs about the self or about others may be contributing to some of the functional disability that's evident in the disorder. We've talked about cognitive difficulties and their close link to functioning. And we know that in most studies, cognitive difficulties explain anywhere from 20 to 60% of the variance or the sort of change or differences from patient to patient in functional outcome. So cognitive difficulties appear to play a substantial role. I mean, 20 to 60% at the higher end there, it's a very substantial role in terms of functional disability in people with schizophrenia. However, at the same time, depending on the study, you may be looking from anywhere from 80% to 40% of the variance in outcome not explained by cognitive difficulties. That's sort of the flip side of that statistic. And dysfunctional beliefs have become a way to try and understand if this might be another source of disability in people with schizophrenia. Dysfunctional attitudes have been measured in several studies in people with schizophrenia, and they've pretty uniformly shown that people with schizophrenia tend to endorse these beliefs at much higher rates than matched healthy controls. These beliefs include things like, if I can't do something really well, there's no point in doing it. If I make a mistake, people will think less of me. If I do not perform this activity perfectly, there's no point in performing the activity at all. Those types of beliefs around the consequences or costs of engaging in activities have been studied as what we've called these dysfunctional beliefs. What the studies have shown is that people with schizophrenia endorse these beliefs, again, to a higher level than people without a diagnosis of schizophrenia, number one. But number two, it appears that they may play a mediational role. That is, they may explain to some extent the relationship between cognitive deficits, negative symptoms, and functional outcome. In short, when I say mediation, what I'm talking about is that the relationship between cognition and functioning may be attenuated or reduced when we account for these dysfunctional beliefs. This has led to a new approach to understanding social deficits in people with schizophrenia, in which we can imagine impaired neural systems. We talked about these neural systems in the neuroscience portion of the course. We can see these impaired neural systems contributing to impaired cognition. So we get the deficits in attention, episodic memory, working memory that we've already discussed in this section of the course. And that in turn, these disruptions in these elementary cognitive skills may lead to repeated failure experiences. And with these repeated failure experiences, these elementary cognitive deficits produce these dysfunctional beliefs. This idea that one is sort of doomed to fail, that one can't carry things out effectively. And along with these dysfunctional beliefs, they end up leading to a retraction from social interaction, a retraction from attempting to learn new skills or engage in new environments, because there's a perception that one will necessarily fail at these tasks. So this is when one of the newer, more integrated models of understanding the complex relationship between brain function, cognitive function, dysfunctional beliefs, and functional outcome.